Welcome, everyone. I hope you're well, that you managed to keep cool. Welcome to all our speakers and attendees from a little tropical London here. Thank you for joining us for today's webinar. This event is sponsored by Project Centre. Project Centre, together with Marston Holdings Group, offers a full range of services for local authorities and private bodies to create safer and happier places. My name is Saskia Huizinga. I'm a senior urban designer at Project Centre, and I will be your host today. I've lived more than 5 years in London and also 5 years in Woon Erfen in the Netherlands, in Utrecht. Woon Erfen are the Dutch equivalent to livable neighborhoods, and I successfully used in the Netherlands for more than 50 years, maybe a factor for the Netherlands to be ranked in the top countries to live as a child. Today we'll be discussing a hot topic, which is the design and implementation of low traffic neighborhoods. Just as a reminder, what is a low traffic neighborhood, or LTN? That is a group of residential streets where through traffic is removed or discouraged, and where vehicles follow pedestrians' pace. The ultimate aim of LTNs is not to lower traffic, but to create livable neighborhoods where residential streets are quieter, less polluted, more environment friendly, and safer for all. And as a result, residential streets can be used for further activities than access and participate in creating a sense of community. These activities include sitting, playing, exercising, gardening, or chatting with neighbors. We're very lucky today to have with us 3 inspiring speakers. We have Clyde Lokes, that is Waltham Forest Deputy Leader and Cabinet Member for Environment. He's going to talk about the Mini Holland and Waltham Forest Scheme. Barbara Wade works for the Liverpool City Region and is Development Manager for the Local Transport Plan. She's going to tell us what Liverpool City Region Build Back Better plan is regarding low traffic neighbourhoods, but also school streets and local centres. And Chris Harrison is Associate Director at Project Centre. He's going to give us practical advice on how to design, implement and monitor low traffic neighborhoods. And a little housekeeping before we get started. Please type your questions into the question box in your GoToWebinar cultural panel. We'll have 5-minute chat with speakers after each presentation and plenty of time for further questions after the 3 presentations. And we are aiming to finish around 11:45. And we would like to encourage you to use the hashtag low traffic neighborhoods to keep the conversation going on social media. So now we will pass the time over to Clyde Lokes, a Waltham Forest Deputy Leader. Over to you, Clyde.
Good morning, Saskia, and good morning, everyone. Let's see if we can make things. Okay, can we click slide, please? And again, thank you. So just for you, to give everyone a little bit of an overview, this is the London Borough of Waltham Forest. It's a northeast outer London borough with Chingford in the far north, Leighton and Leytonstone in the south, and Walthamstow in the middle. And we were lucky enough to be successful in a bid to Transport for London some 7 years ago now, to secure £27 million worth of investment to help improve the cycling and walking infrastructure in Waltham Forest, and that was part of the then Mayor of London, now our Prime Minister's Mini Holland project, and that was to transform walking and cycling in the outer London boroughs. Every outer London borough bid for £100 million, 3 were successful: Waltham Forest, Kingston and Enfield. And since then, for the past 6 years, and continuing really, and we'll come on to that in a little while, we've been kind of rolling out a programme of challenging the status quo that has dominated Waltham Forest and all outer London boroughs, which kind of bowed down to the needs of the car driver, and everyone else was second, third, fourth class with regard to their modes of transport and their needs. So over the past 6 years, we've installed 30 kilometres of segregated cycle track, introduced 31 pocket parks, 51 modal filters so far, but that's rising all the time. And modal filters is where we put a closure in a road or a junction of a road that prevents that running through traffic from using our residential neighbourhoods to bypass the traffic management systems that exist on our main roads to control that level and flow of traffic. But of course, pedestrians, those on push bikes, those in mobility scooters, pushchairs, micro scooters can still access those roads. 145 blended crossings, kind of junctions into our village areas, and the list goes on. Thank you. Next slide. This is kind of one of the areas that has been transformed. This is a hugely busy junction on Lee Bridge Road, close to the Hackney border, but not quite there yet, in the very south of the borough, where we had very traditional infrastructure in place, which was largely no good for any mode of transport. And Lee Bridge Road is our busiest road in the borough for every mode of transport before our Mini Holland intervention. So it's the busiest for bus routes, busiest for through traffic, logistics vehicles, busiest for cyclists, busiest for pedestrians already. But we transformed this junction, click please, and made it far better for those active travel modes by giving them the priority. So if you want to cross a number of the arms of this junction now, you will get that priority at this junction. This has been replicated at a number of other sites throughout the borough. So cyclists and pedestrians get priority at crossing busy junctions. And this is on Lee Bridge Road, our busiest road, as I said. Next slide, please. Many of you may well have already have seen these couple of visuals that I'm about to show, but this is Orford Road. So this was the start of our journey. So Orford Road is in the centre of the Walthamstow Village scheme, which is then moved on to be called a livable neighbourhood, is now referred to a low traffic neighbourhood. So our village schemes were the kind of basis of our Mini Holland bid, and that was to take through traffic out of largely residential areas and put it back onto the main roads that were designed to cater for that kind of level of traffic, and in doing so encourage more people to make more of their day-to-day journeys by walking, by cycling, by micro scooting, because the vast majority of journeys in Waltham Forest are short journeys, and they just didn't need to be done in the motor car. But if you were travelling on Orford Road, this short shopping parade in the centre of the Walthamstow village, then you were really kind of taking your life into your own hands, and you would have to get into the car because the cars were parked, even though there's double yellow lines on the pavements, and the pavements were exceptionally narrow. There was no priority if you were pushing a pushchair. There was no priority if you were on a bike or a pedestrian. And this was a really, really unpleasant road. Around about 2,500 vehicle movements a day on this kind of tight two-way road in the middle of a residential area. Click please. And this is what it's like now, totally transformed. Its priority for the vast majority of the working day is for pedestrians and cyclists. So this now has a timed closure on it because it has a small hopper bus route that serves this. We couldn't put any kind of formal interventions to close the road to through traffic. So we put cameras, and it's a time closure. So from 10 in the morning till 10 at night, only the hopper bus, emergency services, people on micro scooters, people on push bikes, people walking can use this space, and it works exceptionally well. And what we've now seen is this area, the businesses are really flourishing now, and you just see people taking over the road space, and it kind of sets a tone for this entry point into the Walthamstow Village low traffic neighbourhood. So when cars are allowed through this route, and when they come in through other routes, still they are slower. They are far more respectful of pedestrians and other active travellers' needs. I quite often do tours along with a number of other colleagues around this, and before you know it, you are walking in the middle of roads, residential roads. And if you come across a car, which in some respects is a rarity these days in this area, they slow down and they wait for you to move out of the way. There's no kind of hostility to you being in allegedly their space. This is largely a shared space now, and the level of respect has been significantly enhanced, and it's active travellers who are at the top of the hierarchy for use of this space. Next slide, please. Again, this was an area that was regularly fly tipped. This is in our Coppermill livable neighbourhood area, one of our more recent schemes in Walthamstow. An abandoned kind of alleyway really underneath that railway bridge, but actually could be used, could have high footfall if it didn't feel so intimidating, so unpleasant. So we've got lots of fly tips here, regularly issues with antisocial behaviour in this space, but could form a core part of encouraging more walking and cycling through a low traffic neighbourhood. Click please. And this is what it looks like now. You know, I do always say, if you want people to change the mode of transport, if you do want more people to embrace walking and cycling as a way of getting around their local neighbourhood, then you do have to invest in some degree of quality schemes, and so kind of decent planting features, because this is a popular route now to a primary school. You know, features that encourage informal play on that journey from the home to the school really enhance that journey. And then the question is, why would anyone want to travel in any other way than actually this way? Because it's fun, it's playful, and it's pleasant. And these are rainwater gardens that we've planted here as well, and it's a really pleasant experience. And just the other side of the bridge now, we've carried on this particular scheme, so it can kind of enhance that route to school for longer. And of course, what you now have is people stop and chat in this space, because they're not seeing fly tipping, they're not seeing loads of parked cars up. They actually stop and chat, or they meet to then walk on to school or wherever they're going on after school. So it becomes a kind of a hub of community cohesion, a hub of good neighbourliness as well. Next slide, please. And click. Thank you. Changing behaviour is really important. So it's not just about the hard infrastructure, the modal filters, the pocket parks. It's also about facilitating people to make those changes. And and in an urban setting like Waltham Forest, actually bike storage is really important to our residents if we're going to enable and facilitate them to make some of these changes. So we've now got over 500 of these cycle hangers in Waltham Forest. I think that's most of any UK local authority, and we have 4,000 people waiting to get a space in them, and that's gone up by over 25% during lockdown, as more and more people are walking and increasingly cycling around Waltham Forest and wanting to cycle on perhaps onto places of work and other places of leisure going forward. So really popular and a great facility. And of course, we're very dedicated to ensuring that these go in the place that a car would normally have been parked. We're not interested in hiding these around corners. We're not interested in storing these in places that no one visits on a regular basis or has some oversight of. Actually, we treat these just as much as anyone would have wanted their car to have been treated in the past, e.g. outside a house where it can be overlooked, where it's easy to access. Click please. We've invested hugely in cycle training, and in Waltham Forest, whether you're a child at school, whether you're a child in a school holiday, whether you're a family, whether you're a member of a particularly diverse group, whether you've got mobility challenges, whether you want to learn as a family or a group of work colleagues, you can learn how to ride a bike for free. And we have a huge stock of all ability bikes, ranging from some very traditional looking mountain bikes and hybrids through to a huge stock of cargo bikes of all shapes and sizes, e-assist as well, through to some of the very specialist bikes that kind of help people with mobility challenges to learn to ride a bike. There's simply no excuse for not learning how to ride a bike in Waltham Forest, and that's why we've been pretty hard on the government and trying to encourage them to continue to fund cycle training in London. A bit different to the rest of the country, but in London we've had to fight really, really hard for them to give us some money in London to continue with cycle training. Really, really important part of what we do, and we've facilitated a number of different groups now to take on that kind of role of targeting perhaps more harder to reach groups to get on their bike and cycle around the borough, and that's been really, really successful. A big shout out to the Hornbeam Joyriders and the Cycle Sisters in Waltham Forest, who are doing a tremendous job in kind of reaching out, most particularly to women, to get them on a bike, and doing that in a very, very successful way. Click, please. And also kind of walking, we've funded small grants to a number of organisations for the past couple of years to enable them to kind of hone in on those particular groups that you know, could be walking more, whether from a physical or mental health reason. Social prescribing of kind of walking and cycling is a really, really powerful tool, and we've been working with a number of groups with small grants to help them kind of put their interventions into practice with some really, really positive results, and that's a small pot of funding that will continue. Next slide, please. Here's Lee Bridge Road. You can just see the difference. The past couple of years have been a little bit quieter because we were building the segregated cycle track on both sides of Lee Bridge Road, and it's taken a number of years to complete, but last year we finally completed it, and as you can see from this, the increase on cyclists on Lee Bridge Road has literally gone through the roof on a daily basis, and we're really, really proud of the work that we've done there. That's a kind of borough-led, fully segregated cycle track that we're now extending. For those of you who know Waltham Forest, and particularly Bridge Road, we're now extending that at Woodford New Road into Redbridge at the northern end, and we did have plans to work with Hackney to follow the scheme up from the borough boundary with Hackney on Lee Bridge Road into Hackney and onto some of their very good schemes. Unfortunately, with the crisis as a result of COVID-19 and the challenges that TfL now face, that scheme got pulled, but we're hopeful we'll be able to work with them to bring that scheme to fruition at some point in the near future, and that'll be a huge piece of cycling infrastructure that connects real outer London in Redbridge and further into Epping Forest, right into central London if we get that right. Thank you. Next, please. Just something on air quality there, 2013 versus 2020. Obviously, the red and orange is really, really bad. Green and blue is pretty good, certainly for an urban setting. I think we had something like in 2007, something like 70,000 households in Waltham Forest, just under 70,000 households in Waltham Forest were exposed to illegal levels of NOx emissions. By 2017, we'd got that down to round about 6,500 households. So, still 6,500 households too many as far as I'm concerned, but that's a figure that's a lot easier to work with than 70,000. And a lot of that was because we've taken out the through traffic through our residential neighbourhoods, through our low traffic neighbourhood schemes, which is that kind of swathe in the middle of that picture. Taking that through traffic out putting it on the roads that it needs to go to, but also as a consequence of not making Waltham Forest such an easy place for running, a lot of dispersal, so a lot of traffic now not coming in to Waltham Forest because it's not as easy a proposition as once it was. And of course within Waltham Forest, more and more people walking and cycling those kind of short day-to-day journeys that previously they would have jumped in their car to undertake. Next slide, please. Just kind of going through some of the headlines that we've had. We had King's College do an independent piece of research where they were, starting to identify that as a direct consequence of the works that we were doing to prioritise active travel, our young children in Waltham Forest were going to live longer than if we hadn't made those interventions. And actually kind of getting that kind of independent research, getting that kind of reinforcement of some of the messages that we kind of believed would start to occur as a consequence of the interventions we were making, and the political leadership we were displaying was really, really helpful, and continues to be really, really helpful in kind of pushing this kind of very people-based agenda first and foremost. So it's not just about transport. It's not just about the economy. It is about health and well-being. It is about air quality, just better lives for everyone. Click, please. Just kind of some stats on Professor Rachel Aldred did a piece of research at University of Westminster on the first year of all 3 mini Hollands in London, and I don't think TfL were expecting to see a change straight away. But yes, they did see a change straight away in Waltham Forest, and there was a positive change with more people walking and more people cycling. Next, please. Here you've got Orford Road again in the bottom right-hand corner, and Francis Road, which is a larger scheme in a kind of former residential shopping parade in Leighton. Francis Road is, and again that applies that kind of timed closure, which enables people to claim the streets. And you go to Francis Road now, you go to Orford Road now, certainly in the school summer holidays, and there'll be kids playing all over those streets. There'll be their parents in the shops or having a coffee or just talking to their neighbours as they're walking back from the main town centres, because they are walking back, they are cycling back, and they'll stop and they'll have a chat with a neighbour, because these are the kinds of places that these have become. These places where people want to stop and chat. These are places that people want to go to and spend money, and it's revived both of these shopping parades to the extent where they are now destinations where people desperately want to go and spend their money. So we actually import people from some of our other neighbouring London boroughs to come here and spend money, whereas before actually Waltham Forest was a bit of an exporter of the pounds to perhaps the likes of Hackney, Islington, Redbridge, Enfield. But now we see people being drawn in because of these good quality schemes that prioritise people first and foremost, not the needs of the motor car. Next slide, please. Lots and lots of challenges. Many of you will have seen this particular picture. We like a prop in Waltham Forest to demonstrate our point of view. Not least was this coffin, and this was taken at the opening of the Orford Road scheme, where the suggestion was that all the businesses were going to go out of business, so we were creating a Berlin Wall, and it was the death of this local community. And of course, nothing could be further from the truth. Actually, businesses are thriving. Even now in post-COVID, we're seeing those businesses still having the kind of same level of attraction and drawing people in to those spaces. And since this picture was taken, we've had a full set of local elections as well, where my party that introduced Mini Holland stood on a platform of doing more low traffic neighbourhoods, livable neighbourhoods across the borough. Every other party was against that position, even all the independents that stood, and we saw our majorities kind of increase as a consequence, and we gained seats. Whereas actually, if you believed all the social media and the hysteria that some were trying to whip up, you know, we were going to lose, and it was all going to be a different broom was going to come in place. I have to at this point though point out this is not just about direct political leadership. It's not about having kind of great officers that are wedded to challenging what they've been told they've had to deliver for the past 20, 30 odd years, and embracing active travel as the new norm when looking at highway schemes. It's about having community champions. You know, they can go into places that me as a politician, whether it's a Facebook group, a WhatsApp group, and they can argue the case. And we've been very, very blessed with having some really, really good, competent community champions that have challenged the council where needed to be about the quality of the schemes, but they've also gone in and fought for these schemes themselves. So this was never about the council doing to a place. This was about people asking for these kinds of interventions, pushing us to deliver. And the two schemes that we didn't get through consultation, all of our schemes apart from two, all had public support when it came through the engagement and consultation process. The two that we lost, both of those are now being constructed some 2 and 5 years on from their original consultation, because the residents came back and said, we want these schemes. I'm really, really pleased to see that Hilltop yesterday had its final kind of modal filter 3 for that scheme starting to be constructed, which means that now that is another low traffic neighbourhood, and Mark House Series 4, another area in Walthamstow, it's coming to the end of the build of its low traffic neighbourhood as well. So people coming back demanding these schemes, not asking us to pull them out. Next, please. And here's just the 4 that we're currently working on: the Copper Mill area, the Hilltop, Mark House Series 4, I've alluded to already. South Leytonstone is the first cross London Borough boundary low traffic neighbourhoods, and we're doing that with Newham, right in the south of the borough. And you know, so there's another 16 modal filters in Waltham Forest that we're building, you know, more bike hangers, another 17 kilometres of segregated cycle track, you know, and we're removing car parking spaces. So this year I think we'll have moved something like 465 car parking spaces. Last year it was near 900. So we're removing car parking spaces as we start to reprioritise the borough in favour of people. And of course in Waltham Forest we are seeing car ownership decline. It's probably, I reckon, probably around about 50% of households now do not have access to their own car, and that in some wards actually that's pushing near 60+%. So you know, you see there's a change in how people view how they live and how they move about, and that, you know, and that fits into kind of circular economy principles as well, because actually vast majority of the time a car just sits there, you know, in London, parked up, costing money. Well, actually you can join a car club and you can use a car when you need to for those particular trips. That's a more efficient and effective way of accessing vehicle ownership, rather than just simply owning one yourself. And of course, if you don't own one yourself, you're more inclined then to walk and cycle and get other modes of transportation to get around. Next, please. And really just you know, that's been a whistle-top store, but you know, all of our engagement and consultation has been over a significant period of time for all of our schemes, 6 months normally, and at every point during that engagement and consultation the schemes have been tweaked and changed. And then the only schemes that we've introduced, which is all bar 2 initially, have been, you know, supported by residents that took time to get involved in the engagement and consultation. In Waltham Forest, normally about 3 to 5% of people comment on a traditional highways consultation scheme. In some of our mini Holland schemes, we've had upwards of 25% of those able to contribute, taking part in the consultation. So, you know, people are engaged in these processes. And of course, aligning with other council priorities, you know, public health, really, really important. But ultimately, you've got to be brave. We are challenging a status quo that has been embedded for 30+ years. You know, we are turning that on its head, and we're putting finally people at the top of the highway hierarchy rather than the needs of the motor car. And it was really welcome to see that the government's recent review of the highway code, that kind of reflection on that hierarchy, a highway code for active travel first and foremost, and actually a car gets pushed down the list. It's welcome to see that being included. Next, please. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Clyde. It's always impressive to see what you've achieved, and you're an inspiration for us all how to introduce innovative solutions through political will and positive engagement. Now, yes, I'm conscious of time, so we're gonna go straight to the next speaker, and we'll take questions at the end. So yes, and just a reminder for the ones that may have joined us now. So please be sure to type your questions into the question box in your control panel. And our next speaker is Barbara Wade, local travel plan development manager at the Liverpool City region. Over to you, Barbara.
Thanks, Saskia. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to do a quick run through of where we are in the Liverpool City region and what our approach is. We're very much at the beginning of the process. So next slide, please. So for those of you who aren't familiar with the Liverpool City region, it's a combination of 6 local authorities, Liverpool, Knowsley, Halton, Wirral, Sefton, St Helens, and we are the Liverpool City Region Combined Authority together. So I work for the Combined Authority, and we work in partnership with our local authorities to achieve our active travel ambitions. In terms of LTN, as I've said, we're at the very start of the process, unlike Waltham Forest, who are definitely on their journey. So starting our process, we're building on our local cycling and walking infrastructure plan, which was published last November. We're also building on the bike life report that we did in partnership with Sustrans. That was published earlier this year, just before lockdown. And that's a survey of residents in the Liverpool City region, getting their perceptions and thoughts on active travel in general. And there's some really useful statistics in that. And if you've not seen the bike life reports, I would urge you to go to the Sustrans website and look at those. They're really useful, really good information. We're also at the moment taking the opportunity that's been presented to us with the Emergency Active Travel Fund from central government. It's allowed us to do some stuff, and I'll come on to that. All of these plans are obviously leading towards supporting our Combined Authority Transport Plan and the strategic objectives, many of those which are embedded in our recent aspirations to build back better from the pandemic situation that we've all been in, and primarily those are from a transport point of view to improve air quality, reduce carbon, etc., and get people up and about and being more active generally in their lifestyles. Next slide, please. So what is happening in the Liverpool City region? So we're currently in the process, as I said, of developing our LC WIP, which is a 10-year programme to promote cycling and walking. We've got 31 corridors identified in our document, and we are at the beginning of that journey. We've got 2 routes that are currently in detailed design, and we are literally just last week, this week, doing our first stage of consultation and engagement to the residences on those routes, hoping to get some feedback that we can then use to build back into the schemes, to enhance them and make them more appropriate for their locations. So they will be some of those will include measures to reduce traffic in and through sort of local centres. So we are starting to introduce that idea of low traffic areas. We've also got School Street pilot, which has been ongoing in Liverpool City Council area last academic year. That's been done in partnership with Sustrans, and that's been really successful in that environment. It is only a pilot at the moment, and there's a lot of lessons to be learned, and all of our partners are watching that one with interest for when they go back in September in particular. We are exploring low traffic neighbourhood ideas in another part of the region, again working in partnership with Sustrans, one of our local authorities. has commissioned Sustrans to do some work with them in a more residential setting, so not based around a school. And again, we are looking to learn lessons from that and take those forward, because as part of our Tranche 1 Emergency Active Travel Fund, we are incorporating modal filters, and those have been described similar to those that have been implemented in Waltham Forest. We're looking to use temporary measures where we feel that that's appropriate, but there are also some local authorities who are building more permanent structures and measures as part of those processes. And again, it's a learning curve for us, so we'll be watching how those happen and what we can learn from them going forward. The Tranche 2 proposals, which we submitted to DfT on Friday, have again incorporated some of those measures, and we're trying to be a bit more ambitious and advance those a little bit more with our this larger opportunity in terms of funding. So there have been a lot of cycle lanes, but we're also looking to introduce the idea of speed restrictions and road closures, particularly around some of our district centres and local centres, where we feel that that's going to be very valid and important to try and encourage people back into those centres to get the activity, economic activity, back up and running. School streets is also part of our proposal for Tranche 2. Those will be based across the region, and again, I think that's going to be lessons learned on a site-specific basis, and we'll be working very closely, obviously, with the schools in question as we will start to learn how that's going to work starting in September. Next slide, please. So why now? Why is this an important time for us in Liverpool City region? Why have we not been doing this before? Why is it now? Well, obviously, like the rest of the world, during lockdown, people began to appreciate their local environments a little bit more, staying local for their shopping, staying local for their exercise, and also appreciating the quietness that came with a significant reduction in road traffic. So we started to see that people were enjoying that environment and getting out on their bikes more. So I've shared there some results from a tracker survey that we undertook. Admittedly, the tracker survey is not statistically robust. We acknowledge that. It's a self-selected group of people who did the survey online. Nevertheless, when we compare it to some of the information that we gathered in our bike life report, which is statistically robust, you know, that some of the percentages that we're talking about, the direction of travel is very, very similar. So we feel quite comfortable with some of these, with these percentages that we've got here. So in the Wave 1 survey that was undertaken in May, we saw that over a third of people were now choosing to make their journey by bicycle, and that 2/3 had increased their walking to a 15-minute plus walking. Now, that's not always going to the shops or going to work or a journey with purpose, other than perhaps just getting out and getting your hourly activity as was allowed at the time. But nevertheless, that increase to 35% is very significant for us. I think at the moment we're looking at a cycle activity in the Liverpool City region of somewhere between 5 and 8%. So you know, that was quite a growth for us to see. So that was encouraging, and it showed us that people were keen and wanted to get out and do that kind of activity. So the Wave 2 survey that was undertaken 4 or 5 weeks after the initial period in June saw smaller numbers taking active travel as their mode, but nevertheless it's still significantly sufficient for us to be sure that this is what, you know, is going to be welcomed as we move forward in this post-COVID, or sort of living with COVID environment, I would say. And also, because of the difference that we saw in the lockdown period, I think our local politicians began to get questioned by their constituents, and so we have a lot of significant local support now, as well as obviously national government support, where they're pushing the funding and the recent messaging that's been coming out of government, which is really encouraging for us. Next slide, please. So that's just a quick slide to show you some of the results that have come out of our tracker survey, and I won't dwell on this because it's really difficult to see at this scale. So we could move on to the next slide. Thank you. So our next steps, really being very brief, is that We look to implement our tranche 1 and our tranche 2, and we want to show to our population that these measures can work and that they are useful to them. You can see a picture there of some of the pop-up cycle lanes that have been implemented on a major radial corridor in Liverpool, and it's been really welcomed. Obviously, there are some people who don't like the idea, but that's the measure of the ambition that we have in Liverpool City region. That this kind of measure that you can see there in that picture is being replicated across the region in all our local authority areas. So we'll continue with our emergency measures, whether temporary or whether permanent, and that particular example is now being made more permanent with wands rather than the barriers that you see in that picture. And we'll continue with our pilot schemes in terms of our school streets and our local traffic neighbourhoods, our low traffic neighbourhoods. And we'll also continue to learn from those processes, I think, and take those forward into our sort of more permanent measures as we go forward. We are investigating the possibility of bringing in a programme of works for low traffic neighbourhoods. We'll be working with other organisations on that, but that's very early doors at the moment. We are identifying locations alongside our LCWIP routes as we develop those, so that the two things go hand in hand. And I hope that I can come back in 12 months' time and show some fantastic photographs similar to those that we've seen from Waltham Forest. And we can see there that the passion that's been demonstrated by Clyde there, it helps to move these things along and to make a better livable environment for everybody. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Barbara. Good work you're doing in the Liverpool City region, and yeah, will be really interesting to see the outcomes of your plans later this year or next year. And yeah, a quick question about central or local centres. You mentioned you were currently consulting on proposals to reduce traffic through local centres, and such proposals are very important at the moment for businesses to try to recover economically. They would have more space on the streets to use and to compensate for the loss of space indoors they can't use because of social distancing measures. And yeah, all around the world we see these outdoor cafes, al fresco dining areas, and even outdoor entertainment areas for theatre, music venues, and cinemas. And so these measures are extremely useful now over the summer, because it's the weather is perfect, slightly too warm, but perfect for such activities. What are the challenges and solutions that you foresee to make this proposal happen in the short term? Maybe in London we also have like this issue. For instance, a lot of high streets are A roads, and it looks like it's very difficult to make space for businesses on A roads. I don't know if you have the same problem in Liverpool.
Yeah, I mean, the Liverpool City region is a very diverse area. So in Liverpool, in central Liverpool, in the city, the heart of the city itself, the City Council have taken the opportunity, as you've said, during this period to close some roads to traffic, particularly roads where there is that kind of cafe restaurant environment and cluster. So they've done that based on the need to social distance and for restaurants to move out into the outside space. The particular reference to the consultation that is ongoing to a local centre is we'd already planned as part of our LCWIP routes to be consulting sort of during the spring period, and that got slightly delayed because of everything that was happening and COVID and all that. So at the moment, because those schemes were already part of a planned exercise, we're consulting through those. And also it's a slightly different environment, so it's not in the heart of the city centre where perhaps you would imagine it is a recognised, well populated destination point. Some of the outer lying local authorities might struggle a little bit more to understand the need for that kind of change in the environment. So that's why we are consulting in some areas and not in others, and taking it slower, and building the measures appropriate to the location is what I would say.
Yeah, thank you, Barbara. So yes, we'll take further questions at the end. So for the ones that may have just joined us, please use the question box in your control panel. And yes, we'll have a Q&A session after our speaker's presentation. Our next speaker is Chris Harrison, Associate Director at Project Center. Over to you.
Thanks, Saskia, and good morning to everyone. So I'm just going to touch on, hopefully in this sort of next 8 to 10 minutes, just around some of the practicalities of low traffic neighbourhoods and what some of the things to think about as you go through this process. So you've decided that you're going to take some of these forward, and then for what can we do from that. So you've heard some of the real positives of low traffic neighbourhoods and what it can do to transform an area. But they're not always easy to implement and can be quite difficult. We've already seen that some of these have been implemented in the short term and some have already been taken out through opposition. And I don't think necessarily it's about how successful your design is around the low traffic neighbourhoods. It's more around the process that you go through and just understanding where some of these challenges are coming from. So it is likely that you will have a challenge at some point as you go through these. As I said, I think it's more around people's concern over change and they want to understand this. And often some of these campaigns that happen around this build upon the fear of change rather than actually understanding the processes and the facts that are there. So as I said, I think we'll just run through some of these just to understand, what you can do from the very beginning and what you need to understand as you take these forward. So what I've done, I've broken these down into sort of 5 groups. We've gone to the next slide, please. So what I've done is looked at 5 key areas that I think that you need to start considering at the very beginning, really, to help you try and get through this and make sure the implementation works and is successful. So these are the 5 areas: community engagement. We'll talk about process, how you design this and how to take it forward. A bit about data, and then, as you've already seen from Councillor Clyde Lokes' presentation, about sort of political support and how you can build that in from a merely point. So I'll start off with a bit about community engagement. So next slide, please. Community engagement. The way you engage in these low traffic neighbourhoods is extremely important. It is one of the fundamental elements of making sure that these are successful. You need to have an open process and you need to be able to take people on a journey with you through this process. One thing I would say is you can't engage with people early enough. The earlier you engage with residents and businesses, the more likely you are to build up a community group that are interested in the project, or interested in what you're trying to achieve and what you're trying to do. It'll also enable you to build up an understanding from businesses and key stakeholders within that area. Now, if you start them early and go through this process, you'll have then a database of people that you can call on as you progress through your design to understand whether this will fit into the local area, into the local group, and therefore be successful in your implementation. I think one of the important elements of this at the very beginning especially is that these issues in the local area might not be traffic related. So they might not be things that you associate with putting in modal filters. It might be around ASB and crime or other things that are in the area. But it's important that you understand them issues too, because often it's them issues that they don't associate with the traffic, whether it be noise or other elements. But actually, by putting in low traffic neighbourhoods, you actually resolve them and take out them issues for people. So don't be afraid to, when you're speaking to residents and stakeholders, to understand a broader, wider measures in that area when you're taking it forward. So next slide, please. I think the next point I wanted to go on was around process. So the one that you can see, the slides that you can see here is from Tower Hamlets and the Livable Streets programme. However, it was a similar process that Waltham Forest undertook. And as you can see, there's a number of things within the process, from perception surveys, concept designs, workshops, and feasibility design. So this, to me, allows residents and businesses to understand what process you're going to go through from the beginning. This will often bring those that are concerned about change on board. So we'll be able to encourage people to understand the process. Once you've got the process fixed, then people will fit into that and know that they can fit in. So I would say from the very beginning, make sure you think about the process. Now, this one in particular, I know the Waltham Forest one had a lot of public engagement and community engagement, which I think is good, but might not be what you can do in the short term, especially now with COVID-19. Some of these processes may need to change. But I think the most important element of this is from the outset, know what process you're going to put in place. As well as that, you can then start building in when decisions are going to be made and how then decisions are going to be made. Do you need to go for a cabinet decision? Do you need to go for a particular senior officer? And make sure they're aware that you can also fit that into this process. Residents then and stakeholders again will then understand where you're going with this and that they can then be part of the process. So I think from the very beginning, make sure that you outline this to enable people to follow and be with you on this and ensure that you get it right. Another part of this is making sure you build in the legal requirements. So things like traffic orders are vital that you follow the process correctly to understand what they do and what you can do in each one. I know at Waltham Forest there was a legal challenge to the traffic orders, but the way that it was detailed, the way that it was recorded through, meant that it was successfully defended and the scheme continued to go through. Another part of this is that traffic orders, and especially some of the new measures, actually allow you to change some of the schemes as you implement. So if you use an experimental order, actually you can put stuff in and make changes so that it fits in with the local groups, and you can help to encourage people to be part of the process because they know they can still influence and change certain elements as you go through the scheme. So do have a real thing at the beginning of how you're going to see your scheme progress and how you're going to see it implemented. It's important. So next slide, please. So I've added this in. This is one of my favourite quotes. A city that is good for children is good for everybody. Now, when you're thinking about design and you're thinking about what you want to achieve by putting low traffic neighbourhoods, there's lots of benefits and lots of areas that you can improve on. But I always come back to this whenever I look at whether we should put a modal filter in, whether it's a time closure. I think that if we can create a city that's good for children, it's good for everyone. So if we can make a road safe for a kid to cycle to school, then actually that road will be safe for everybody. If we can make the air quality good for children and we're happy with that, then actually it's good for everybody. So often when I look at the design and when you come back to it, then always try and have that objective clear in your mind about what you're trying to achieve and where you're going to achieve it. So that comes on to defining the area. So next slide, please. One of the, and I've seen this in a number of different places, it's quite, people quickly pick the area that they want to do, and especially your first low traffic neighbourhood, if you haven't got them at the moment, your area really is crucial to making sure that you can take this forward. You heard previously in Waltham Forest, and I know in other places, the first one is a catalyst to building these in a wider area. So actually, if you can get the right area, I know it'd be tempting to take an area where you could probably get the most complaints, or you get the area that is most residents that are writing to you or councillors, but actually have a think about it. So the one that you can see here is Bow in Tower Hamlets. And what we try to look at is the area itself is bounded by some of the main roads, some of the roads that we expect traffic to be on. But also in the area, we started looking at what are the key walking routes, what are the key cycling routes, where are people trying to get to? And also the fact that it's got lots of schools and it's got a town centre and local shops. That gives us a basis to try and encourage local residents to walk to the transport, to the train stations, walk to the local centre, use the local shops. If only we could create them excellent cycle and walking routes within this area, we can change them short trips from vehicle use into walking and cycling and active travel. So when you look at your area, do look at what is the area like and what can you change and influence. So next slide, please. So that will then lead you on to the choice of measures that you want to create in now that you've got your area. And again, it's important to think about this quite early on, and the fact that you can have a number of different measures within a low traffic neighbourhood. You don't have to pick one measure. You don't have to say, okay, we're going with modal filters and we're going to filter every street out from there. There could be certain areas that need to have a time closure. There might be local shops, there might be deliveries that are happening. So therefore you can use ANPR cameras to modify that. It may be that you've got an area where there's a hospital and there's a high number of people that are blue badges or disabled people that need to drive in that area, that you can then look at the ways in which you can use the technology to allow people through, but reduce down some of the rat running traffic. So have a think across your area. It's not one size fits all, and in each area you can use all these different methods as one to create your area. Next slide, please. Now, this is probably my most important slide and one I really want people to take away from this presentation, in the fact that a low traffic neighbourhood, we talk about traffic, and yes, that is important and that allows us to do other things. But one of the most important things is that you're changing a neighbourhood, you're improving the areas that people live. Now, the streetscape improvement, I think, is vital. Identify areas very early that you can change. It doesn't have to be where you're closing it to traffic. It can be small bits of land that you can make look a lot better, make it feel better for people in that area. Now, I've often found if you speak to people about this, actually the residents get very excited about these changes. They get very excited about being part of this. Now, if that therefore means that there's any, people come together for this, then actually drivers that may have to go back onto the main road, it might take them an extra couple of minutes, or they have to drive a little bit further, understand that there's this change and interchange between, okay, I get these benefits and this area has this for children, people to sit and socialise, but actually I will transfer and I will do that extra couple of minutes because of the way that my street now looks and feels. So this is an important tool in making sure that we can progress this and progress these streets. So really do look at your streetscape improvements and what you can do in each area. Next slide, please. One of the key things when you're going into looking at low traffic neighbourhoods is having a good basis of an understanding of what you're trying to do in an area. So your data collection and your monitoring can be really key into persuading those people that don't understand or don't know what's going to be achieved by doing this. So here's just on the slide is a few things around sort of some of the ASB hotspots that might be an area, and again this is for Bow, looking about air quality monitoring data. The diagram there shows that anything above the red line there is above the World Health Organization limits, and you can see some of the residential streets is well above. Now, using this data often influences people about how they feel about their area. It's not something that you'll see on a day-to-day basis. You walk down the street, you don't understand that each day the level of pollution that you're breathing in. So getting this data and actually having facts around this can be very influential in how you design and push forward some of these different measures. So next slide, please. Some of the other considerations, I think, as we go through this, and I've mentioned political support is really key to this. So if you go through this process, and as I mentioned at the beginning, there could be opposition to this, you need to know that you've got support that you're taking this forward. And where is that pressure coming from? It'll be often that residents are actually in favour of these areas, and it could be those that are cutting through the area are the people that don't want it to happen. So it's having this understanding and speaking and having that conversation with the political people that are involved in this, so they're aware of what's happening, so they don't end up just getting out of the blue hundreds of letters about what is this scheme and what is the development of it. Take them on the process as well and make sure that you've got that support for these measures and how you're taking forward. There's a couple of other things, there's legal powers seem to be changing quite rapidly now. We've waited a long time for these to come in place, but with COVID-19, these things are pushing quite quickly. The ability to enforce moving traffic contraventions, we're expecting fairly soon. It's already in place in London, but that could be something that could be really powerful in developing these schemes and allowing you to do stuff that you want to do. And then I'll follow up on 2 points really that was mentioned towards the end of Clyde's presentation, and that is around the complementary measures. Think about some of the elements you do. You put a modal filter in, that's great, but actually if lots of people live in flats, where are they going to store their bike? It becomes difficult, therefore you don't get a bike, therefore you don't cycle on the road. What about some of the community gardens that I've already mentioned about? Get people involved in the community that can then take it a step forward and actually be part of this and desire to make change. So do think about all these activities. I've put working together, one council, one authority. Now, within your area, I have no doubt that in certain parts that there will be people within your health teams, within your community teams, that will already be engaging with the local residents in these areas. So don't start from scratch. Find out a bit more about your area. Find out about what is actually already happening and try and link together and actually put this together as one area. So you're not just solving the traffic issues. You're going into an area to make improvements across the board in one part. And then I think the final slide, if we can go on. Really, so these are kind of my thoughts around it. There's lots of documents out there. It's fantastic to see the gear change that's come out recently and some of the designs there. They're very good to read, and it's really good to see some sort of authority at the top that is also pushing for this. And I think it allows you, therefore, to move on and know in confidence that actually this is what needs to happen in order to get them benefits you've seen in some of the other schemes. I think that was my last slide.
Thank you, Chris. Yeah, that was very useful to have practical advice on the whole design process required to implement and improve low traffic neighborhoods. We've got a few questions that you may be able to answer about time scale. The question is, how long does it usually take between a perception survey and the construction of the elements that create a low traffic neighborhood, and how can it be accelerated during these times?
So I think it's usually sort of 8 to 10 months as a process. But as I said, I mean, you can change and adapt that depending on the area and how much knowledge you've got of that area, and if other people are already working with the community. I think during these times, I think it'll be good to shorten that, and there is some things that you can do. I know that there's a lot of new mapping software out there, so residents can go on and online and actually map some of their concerns, and maybe that can shorten some of the time where you do the perception surveys around elements that you're linked to. And again, I think if you can get a good database of residents in that first element of that perception survey, if you can get out and get lots of people coming in, then you can have individual conversations around their street and not necessarily do maybe big workshops that are obviously at the moment very difficult to do, and therefore you shrink that timeline and get things in. Having said that, at Tower Hamlets, we did do a workshop online the other day, which was very successful. So we've got a number of people come to our workshop, and we presented on something similar to this. And then we had a number of separate groups that residents broke into and had a debate around what measures we should take forward. So it is still possible in these times to have these workshops in place as well.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Yes, I'm going to call all speakers again, so we can have a broader Q&A session. There was a question for Barbara that was about when everything needs to happen, what to do first. How did you choose what to do first?
Good question. I think because we were already developing our cycle route network, but we were conscious of the fact that we needed to pick up walking networks as well as part of that exercise. The idea of low traffic neighbourhoods kind of started then to develop out of that. So when I mentioned earlier that we will be identifying locations for our low traffic neighbourhoods, we would look to build those upon our sort of strategic cycle network. So as we start to implement that, we will do the two things together. So probably strictly speaking, it started with our strategic cycle network, but they have slowly started to morph as we can't do one without the other. Does that make sense?
Yes, exactly, makes sense. And yeah, there is a question related to this as well, maybe for Clyde, because and the question is, after the implementation of low traffic neighborhoods, have you seen an increase of traffic on the peripheral roads, and or not, or a decrease? And how do you, because of course the whole network approach is required to do things well. And what I liked actually with well, like very much with Waltham Forest approaches, you do have a comprehensive approach. You do know that if you don't provide quality walking and cycling infrastructure on key links, the traffic will be displaced to these main roads. Can you tell us more about your approach?
Yeah, so I mean, for those of you who don't know Waltham Forest is at the bottom of the A12. It has routes off of the A406. It has close proximity to the M11 and the M25. So Waltham Forest is in itself a huge rat run off of many significant kind of commuter and logistics routes from across the UK, not just in the southeast and London. So, you know, we have some real challenges. So in our low traffic neighbourhood areas, we have seen, you know, some of that traffic revert to our main roads, Lea Bridge Road, Hoe Street, for example, but not all of that traffic. So we have seen evaporation, and those main roads have the capacity to take that kind of level of commuter and logistic travel. It had the traffic management systems, the lights, etc. on it to deal with those levels of traffic. However, in both Hoe Street and on Lea Bridge Road, we have also upgraded the traffic management systems on those roads. So rather than just one junction being a junction and a unit in itself, the whole of Lea Bridge Road is now a single unit, and it talks to each other. So it effectively manages the through traffic in a far more efficient and effective way than it ever did before, which is why, because these routes are clearly also some of our busy bus routes, we have seen an improvement in bus times on these roads too. So it's not just about, oh, you've just dumped all this extra traffic on these main roads. It is about effectively managing, reducing first that traffic that can be reduced, those short base car journeys, those sole occupancy car journeys, you know, which was something like 60% of all the journeys in Waltham Forest were of that nature. Reducing those first, getting people walking and cycling those journeys first, and then it's about how you address other traffic that comes into Waltham Forest and still needs to come into Waltham Forest, and how you move that through more effectively and more efficiently using the routes that should be used for that type of traffic. So that's what we've done, and that's what we've done very, very well in Waltham Forest.
Mm-hmm. Yes, we're talking more and more about network planning in the UK. That is, yes, very much required to create a joint network of walking, cycle routes, and also livable places. Do you think this strategic way of thinking will be more and more, is this what we're gonna be seeing in the coming months? And how do we manage strategic thinking with short deadlines that the government give to local authorities to bid for funding?
Do you want me to come back on that one, Saskia?
Yeah.
I mean the adage is build it and they will come. Build decent pavements, take out cars that park on pavements, build segregated cycle tracks, build low traffic neighbourhoods, and people's reliance on the motor vehicle, the private motor vehicle, will reduce. You know, and that can be done quickly, as we are seeing in London and across the UK. We are seeing low traffic neighbourhoods popping up all over the place using some of the re-emphasised temporary traffic management orders that the government's encouraging us to use, and using kind of temporary interventions to kind of enable us to kind of live through that experience, and then recognise that civilization doesn't collapse. And of course, the opponents of low traffic neighbourhoods want you to believe that if you can't get in your car and go the exact same route that you've been driving for the past 10, 15, 20 years, then civilization is going to collapse. Shops are going to close, businesses are going to go out, and oh my word, the economy will collapse. Actually, the reality is that does not happen, and there's no proof in Waltham Forest, in London, in the UK, across the globe that that happens. On the contrary, what is proven is people spend more money in their locality. And in a post-COVID world where clearly more people are going to be working more often from home, they are going to use their local shops more and more. And they'll be walking and cycling because that'll be part of their daily exercise routine that perhaps they would have used to have done as they went down to the tube station or the rail station. But actually, they're going to use those shops more and more. So actually, the time for low traffic neighbourhoods has never been better. The time to reject the status quo of the past 30 years that allowed the car and the needs of cars to dictate how we designed our residential streets, how we designed our neighbourhoods, how we designed our healthcare system to deal with the consequences of excessive car use, through the air quality issues that come from it, through the inactivity issues that come from it. Now has never been a better time. So use those new powers where you can introduce your schemes temporarily, consult while the schemes are in place, and design even better schemes as a consequence.
Thank you. That's yes, always very inspiring. We have 4 minutes. Is there anything you would like to share with our attendees that you find important? Chris, any?
Yeah, I'll just sort of follow up on that point that Councillor Clyde's been making around sort of when you go into the funding. I would say be brave and actually take forward measures that will make a difference. So it's often tempted when you go into this that actually you think, well, okay, maybe we shouldn't do quite this and we'll just do half-hearted, put that in because some people may be against it. I think the things that really give you the benefit is when you actually design it properly for what it needs to be. So make sure when you're looking at these that you do put it in, put the quality into these schemes, because if you put the quality into it, that's where the benefits are, and that's what's important. So when you're looking at the funding, looking at what you're trying to do, follow the process still, but make sure that you go for quality and make sure that you go for the full scheme into it. Don't try and make this a half-hearted feel to it, because that's where your benefit will come.
Thank you, Chris. Barbara, final word?
Yeah, no, I was just going to add that, sort of reiterate, I suppose, what both Clyde and Chris had said, is that although we're at the beginning of our process, I think the importance of the consultation and engagement with the local communities is it always just feels that's what should lead us, and that, you know, then you can bring the communities with you, and hopefully you can deliver that quality environment that people want and are then prepared to use because they've taken ownership. They could see how it's developed along the aspirations that they have, you know, rather than maybe some, I don't know, local government officer sitting somewhere where they don't even recognise. And then also that we, you know, my ambition is to get to the position that Clyde outlined, and that we then get, you know, 2-3 years down the line, we get communities coming to us asking us to deliver the same kind of exercise and measures in their local community. That's my ambition for this process.
Great. All right. Thank you, everyone. So it was a pleasure to be with you today. We appreciate our attendees to have follow us, and we hope that you've enjoyed the webinar. Please use the hashtag Low Traffic Neighbourhoods to keep the conversation going. The slides will be on Landor website and Project Centre's website as well. And thank you again for joining us today, and see you next time. Bye-bye.